just dense, dense energies, and it's going to get worse, and it's going to get worse. It's going to be like treading water inside tide, and a tide that's pulling you out. That's why spiritual hygiene is so vitally important in these days. When it comes to April, May, and June, this ain't nothing. It's going to be 50 times worse. We've reached the point of separation of densities where whatever it is that your soul is holding on to now, it will be separated out. It's dense energy versus light energy. We've reached the fork in the road. And that's where you start tearing the paper, and tearing it goes to two sides. And that means the I am presence will have to make a choice to stay in the dream world to resolve density in the dream world, or to stay in this world and have multiple dream world experiences, thus an awakening into your true self. And that awakening is at everyone's touch. Your ability to find your own neutrality of your own self without a belief system co-creating with you. When we have interpersonal relationships with people with multiple belief systems, we come to the ultimate option of a la carte belief system. If I can have a belief system that will heal me right now, what is wrong with choosing that belief system in that moment? And when that moment is done, that belief system is just part of your toolbox as you navigate through reality, trying to discover the truth of nature and the nature of truth, and how perception and deception are one and the same, whether it's the reflection of the mind, the soul, or the spirit. And there are differences between mind, soul, and spirit. It's how we work with time. We've talked about decalibration from fraud time. That was what December 21st was meant to be. We have not come into our new lunar year yet, but we are certainly gathering close. And this is why those dense energies are building up and building up and building up. As I've said, like a train wreck about to happen. And some people's, like the lady I spoke of, her train wreck was today. Over and over and over again. You can't get one, but it gets stacked up more and more and more.
Very importantly, we developed the concept of virtue and character. The ancient Greeks themselves did. And that concept was in particular elaborated by the Romans. And so you hear, I believe it's the philosopher Epicurus, amongst others, who said, your fate is your character. And I think what they meant by that in the early days, because in ancient times life was tough, what they meant is you might not be able to escape your fate. There were tyrants, and a tyrant might come into your city, and a tyrant might decide that he wanted to take your house for himself, and he might kick you out of your house, and a tyrant might even decide that you needed to be imprisoned, or the tyrant might decide that you should even be whipped. But you always could control your attitude about these things. The tyrant might try to break you completely and humiliate you completely. And the tyrant could control everything physical about your circumstances. But the tyrant couldn't control your sense of yourself and your sense of virtue. And by that, some of the Stoic philosophers in particular meant that the tyrant couldn't control the fact that in that situation, you're the virtuous one and he is not. And that no matter what the tyrant tried to strip away from you, he couldn't strip away your virtue. Now, I don't know if a modern psychologist would agree to that. People do succumb to tortures and to pressures, and the world might not be so clean. But we developed this notion that we have some control over our own lives, and it starts with what we think about ourselves. That's a deep conception, that we have the ability to change our lives by changing the way we think. Not every culture, not every myth accepts that.
We're a manifesting, creating species. So our fear means we will create our own destruction. Like literally. We're at this point where there's not enough people in fear now to create destruction, but there's enough people still in fear to keep us from awakening.
Right.
Right. Well, are you, I know the students are amazed that you're hitchhiking and walking so much, and they wonder about the dangers, and they're concerned a bit about you're being in danger doing so much hitchhiking and walking.
I don't feel I'm in any way in danger because, you see, I have no fear. One of the things we're just coming to realize is that we create through thought. We constantly create through thought. We create our inner conditions. We hope to create the conditions around us. Now, if you're fearful, what will happen? You will attract the things you fear. I fear nothing and expect only good. So to me, only good comes. But then, of course, I'm always thinking about the best that could happen and all the good things that I want to see happen, because those are the things I want to emphasize.
Now, of course, when you see these other things, these other realities, it's not so much a physical instrument that you use, it's your intuition, it's your imagination, if you have one. It's pattern recognition time. It's Sherlock Holmes time. It's forensic science time. You start putting the pieces together with great love, because if you don't do it with passion and love, you're never going to get there. If you do it from fear, like most people are doing, and do it from trepidation and paranoia, you might as well not bother.
So many people are waking up to the fact that they believe themselves to be patriots of their nations, and in fact they are slaves to their own nation.
Yes.
Look at your own credit card, your own ID system. I mean, what does it take for people to realize that your own government has sold corporate bonds to corporate organizations on your own health and wellness? And they've even predicted how much money you will earn in a certain lifetime, in your next lifetime. And that's what they're using to trap you with a digital sacred geometry system, as well as a physical sacred geometry system that overlays the natural earth ley lines.
And to emphasize that point,
the world judged the Iraqi regime was a dangerous aggressor. In the interests of world peace and regional security, the community of nations required Iraq to surrender its offensive arsenal, its chemical and biological weapons, and abandon its nuclear weapons program. Iraq agreed to comply.
The world judged the Iraqi regime to be a dangerous aggressor. In the interests of world peace and regional security, the community of nations expelled Iraq from Kuwait, required Iraq to surrender its offensive arsenal, its chemical biological weapons, and to abandon its nuclear weapons program. Iraq agreed to comply. Iraq's continued defiance of the community of nations presents a challenge which must be addressed.
Presents a challenge which must be addressed. It is inherently dangerous
to allow a country such as Iraq to retain weapons of mass destruction, particularly in the light of its past aggressive behaviour.
That's right.
If the world community fails to disarm Iraq, we fear that other rogue states will be encouraged to believe that they too can have these weapons, these most deadly of weapons, to systematically defy international resolutions, and that the world will do nothing to stop them. That is the ultimate nightmare, which the world must take decisive and effective steps to prevent.
And effective steps to prevent. Possession of chemical, biological, or nuclear weapons by terrorists would constitute a direct, undeniable, and lethal threat to the world, including to Canada Australia
and its
people.
The world has tried other means for years,
but so far to no avail. We cannot walk away from the threat that Iraq's continued possession of weapons of mass destruction constitutes to its region and to the wider world. In the final analysis, Mr. Speaker, the absolute conviction of the government is that disarming Iraq is necessary for the long-term security of the world and is therefore manifestly in the national interest of Australia.
In the final analysis, Disarming Iraq is necessary for the long-term security of the world, to the collective interests of our historic allies, and therefore, manifestly, Mr. Speaker, it is in the national interest of this country.
And so on and so forth. President of Canada, President of Australia. No ostensible connections and exactly the same script, practically word for word. We have many other examples of this. No conspiracy. Nobody higher up. It's all coming from their minds and their brains.
But what they can do is propagate propaganda that makes a certain section of people so fearful that they can create a temporary destruction in their area.
Right.
A volcano, an earthquake. Though I am in this state of understanding that no big destructions will happen unless you create it in your local reality because of mass propaganda and fear, carpet bombing that area.
Mm-hmm.
Edgar, there's one important lesson we must learn from the history we've all been through and the history we've read about, and that is simply this: fear is a great motivator. That if you can get people to live in fear, then you can sell them any damn thing that you want. And so basically what the whole idea is when we run out of one fear that has been pushing people in one direction, the organizations, the industries that are behind all this media and behind selling us all their products and ideas will come up with another fear, no matter which one it is. Sometimes it's a fear of the environment we live in. We talk about the water is bad, the air is bad, and everybody starts getting nervous about that. Then we talk about the bacteria and the viruses that are bad and the flu that comes around every year. And then we start talking about, oh my God, the radiation from Japan is going to, kill us all. Every time we start to get a little calmed down, then we are faced with another new fear to take our minds off the immediacy of what's going on. And in a moment of fear, very important, as I describe in the lecture, that neural functions change in fear. Not only we change the chemistry of our body, but the stress hormones change the operation of the brain. That when we're in fear, the stress hormones squeeze the blood vessels shut in the forebrain, which is conscious reasoning and logic thinking, and forces the blood, as a result of closing down the blood vessels in the front, forces the blood to the hindbrain, where we operate from reactive behavior, which is not thinking at all, it's just stimulus response. So the nature is, as we become more engaged in fear, we become less intelligent, and at that moment more open to the resolutions provided by industry, who were selling the fear in the first place. So basically the issue is, I don't know what the exact next fear is. Maybe aliens are going to be here. They're selling that one as well. Whatever you want to talk about, they will find one, they will sell it, and the mass of the population will buy it. And as a result, they will be further disempowered, and more power will be channeled in to the few that are making the decisions for the masses.
I'm not even breaking a sweat.
Not you. Look, the new commercial's on.
The future is bright at Monsters Incorporated.
I'm in this
We're
one.
part
I'm
of
in this
your
one.
life. We power your car. We warm your home. We light your city.
I'm Monsters Incorporated.
Hey, look, Betty!
Carefully matching every child to their ideal monster to produce superior screen, refined into clean, dependable energy. Every time you turn something on, Monsters Incorporated is there.
I'm Monsters Incorporated.
We know the challenge. The window of innocence is shrinking. Human kids are harder to scare.
Of course, MI is prepared for the future with the top scarers, the best refineries, and research into new energy techniques.
Okay, here I come.
We're working for a better tomorrow. Today.
We're Monsters Incorporated.
We're MI, Monsters Incorporated. We scare because we care.
I can't believe it.
The organizing principle of any society is for war. The basic authority of a modern state over its people resides in its war powers. Today, it's oil. Tomorrow, water. It's what we like to call the God business. guns, oil, and drugs. But there's a problem.
I don't give a shit.
Our way of life. It's over. It's unsustainable and in rapid decline. That's why we implement demand destruction. We continue to make money as the world burns. But for this to work, the people have to remain ignorant of the problem until it's too late. That's why we have triggers in place. 9/11, 7/7, WMDs. A population in a permanent state of fear does not ask questions. Our desire for war becomes its desire. A willing sacrifice. You see? Fear is justification. Fear is control. Fear is money. You're a brilliant soldier, and I could still use someone like you.
I'll ask you one more time. Where is she?
One of the commenters on this kind of a certain psychopathy was Nikolai Machiavelli, and he has to say that a prince, and this is somebody aspiring for political power, ought to have no other aim or thought, nor select anything else for his study than war and its rules and discipline. For this is the sole art that belongs to him who rules, and it is of such force that it not only upholds those who are born princes, but it often enables men to rise from private station to that rank. So he's encouraging the elites to think in psychopathic ways. He goes on to say that from this arises the question whether it is better to be loved rather than feared. For feared or feared rather than loved. It might perhaps be answered that we should wish to be both. But since love and fear can hardly exist together, if we must choose between them, it is far safer to be feared than loved. There's your psychopathy. There's your conscious, deliberate decision-making and advice.
And there's something that you touched on in the last episode that I thought was really important to get some clarity on. You were talking about fear and how the dark T-shirts are basically throwing out all they can at this point because they know that this is a time when they need to disrupt things. So
I have a question as well, Andrew, and this probably puts into perspective some of the things that maybe you've put out there in public and in our chats as well, and in relation to the individual's endocrine system, because the trigger for releasing the adrenochrome in the individual is a fear and the fear state. So we look at the media and events going on that influence the masses, and we're all sensitive to the other states of each other and stuff like that. So the fear state basically milks the individuals of their life force. And this goes back to sort of the mystery school sort of beginnings of this whole chat, because it goes into the individual self-empowerment and not buying into that fear state. Do you have anything to add on that?
Oh, absolutely. The fear state, when you are functioning in it, you're using the media system, it's running a program on you, so your adrenal glands work absolutely in overtime. So you're filling yourself up. And then there are entities that go through the big cities, as I was describing cities as sacred geometry cities, and they go block by block by block, and they look for something that's like a fruit tree that's ready to be harvested, quite literally. And if you if you haven't dealt with your ancestral karma, these beings have access to you. That's why ancestral karma is so vitally important, because that's their access point to you. When your endocrine system is overloaded and they haven't harvested you, it's because you're a manifester and you're spreading fear to everyone else. You know, just the slightest little copy and paste or share on a Facebook page, you don't realize that you're feeding that energy, because it's a train. It's like adding another car to the train over and over and over again. In 2012 was all about the fear and creating so much confusion of what's fear and what's real that you couldn't tell the difference. And everyone's endocrine system was working triple time that whole year. And then we got baked by solar flares. Then we had multiple, planetary alignments that twisted our energies in a different way. And this year we've had a lot of silence. And now these people are trying to put out in prediction, the May 17th and June 1st people at the underworld. Bull hockey. We are manifesting beings, and stop being afraid. Stop spreading the fear porn. Look inside yourself. Heal yourself. Look into your karma. Stop investing into those things that promote more cars on the train of fear.
Mm-hmm.
Signals that come in. Let's just stop. Let's end at this moment on that other section. What does it say? It says that signals control the biology, that conventional medicine only, as it said in the science article, recognizes molecules as the source of the signals, but quantum physics, which is the parent science, and all science have to adopt to the quantum physics, so biology has to adopt the physics and recognize what quantum physics says is that energy activates these receptors as well, but I don't have to convince you of that. I already have all the literature in the papers right now that energy does the same as molecules, so energy healing is not some kind of made-up thing or some kind of, being some quackery. Energy healing is real because energy is more effective in controlling biology than molecules are, and that's according to physics. So the bottom line is we have ignored the role of energy because conventional medicine is locked back in a pre-1925 version of physics. But in 1925, when quantum physics came in, it says you must include the energy in the equation. Now the question is this. I have a cell, and I know the behavior of the cell is elicited by the receptors that read the signals. Here's this beautiful understanding, because this is what simplifies my understanding about how it all works, and then I applied it to my life, and it made such beautiful changes in my life. And it works like this. I used to clone human cells, and when I put them in the culture dishes, I'd observe their behavior and do things. And one of the things that's very interesting, if I put a cell in the culture dish when I started, and the cell is here, and I put food over here, when I start the experiment, I put the food over there and cells over here. When I come back a little later, where do you think the cell is? The cell moves toward the food, right? Okay. Experiment number 2. I put the cell over here at the start of the experiment, and I put toxin in over here. And I come back in a few minutes later, where's the cell going to be? Over here. Look, this is so beautiful because here's the truth. At the level of the cells of which we are based, there's only 3 behaviors a cell can do, obvious behaviors that you can see. And here are the 3 behaviors. The cell can move toward a signal. The cell can move away from a signal. And the third one is actually a signal can be made in the environment, but the cell ignores it because it's not relevant. So there's actually 3 different movements. Moving forwards, moving backwards, or not moving at all. Does that make sense? I mean, you can see it, right? So here's the issue. Then the behavior of the cell is actually divided into 2 kinds of behavior. When a signal is presented that the cell needs for its maintenance and its growth, the cell will always move toward the signal. When the cell is presented with a signal that threatens its life, then the cell will move away from the signal. So there's only 2 behaviors. What are they? Moving forward is growth, and moving backwards is protection. So the bottom line is this. Point. Now look at the logic, because this is the part that's like profound but simple. A cell moves forward for growth, moves backwards for protection. Can a cell move forwards and backwards at the same time? Yes or no? No. Point. Fundamental, profound nature of the point. The cells in your body are digital. When they receive signals that say growth, they will move toward things in growth. But if they're not receiving growth, then they will move backwards in protection. And the point about it is this. Then the cells in your body are going back and forth between growth and protection based on what? The perception of the environment. But since the cells are in the community, they're also the perception of the brain. So as you're thinking, what are you doing to the cells? You're giving them information about their environment. If you think that, oh my God, I can't make it through this lecture because the damn projector broke. Oh my God, what do you think my cells are going? Oh Bruce, they're hiding out. On the other hand, it's like, cool, we can make anything, we can do anything, we can survive. And what are the cells going to do? Well, they're not going to shirk backwards, they're going to move forwards in growth. Why is this relevant? Because the behavior is that clearly digitized, that it's one or the other. And the point is this, although you have 100,000 different gene programs minimum, I can take all the gene programs in your body and divide them into 2 groups. Those genes that provide for growth and reproduction, and let me explain what I mean by growth. Growth is not just from a baby to an adult. You are growing every day. Why? Because every day you're losing thousands, millions, trillions of cells a day. And if you don't replace those cells, what's going to happen to your body? You're going to experience disease and death. And so the bottom line is this. then for you to survive on a day-to-day basis, just to keep level, you're growing all the time. And that's a requirement of the system. So the fact is this, growth goes on and it keeps you healthy and alive. And then the issue is this, once you reach a certain age, then the genes, there are also genes for growth, but growth of the next generation. So the growth genes are for you or for the next generation. So those are growth genes, okay? On the other hand, growth, as I said, is only when the cells are moving forwards. But when cells are moving backwards, they exercise protection programs. So there's another set of genes in your body, or your cells, which are involved with your protection. But the point about it is this. A cell at any one time is either in growth or it's in protection, but it can't be in both. Now I got to ask you a simple question, and it's economics. Does it take energy to grow? Does it take energy to protect yourself? Well, then the point about it becomes very simple, because here's the point. When you find that you're in protection, you have to use energy. But the more protection you're in, the more energy you use. Well, where are you getting the energy from? You have a balance. You have like a checking account in your body of energy to run this body. And the more checks you write for protection, what happens to the balance? It gets less and less. And there's a point where so much protection is used that you actually now short growth processes. And this is true for like the nation right now. Right now, our budget has in excess of 50% of the U.S. budget is in protection. What does that mean? Well, all that money that's allocated for protection is not helping us grow or maintain the country in any way, because that's all put into armaments and whatever they are. And the issue is this applies to your own body. When you walk out on the street, when you wake up in the morning, you start to live, you're vacillating between growth and protection. And the issue about it is the more protection you require, or you perceive you require, and that's the trick, the one that says you think you need protection, the more you put into that, the less growth you start to accommodate. And here's an interesting part. You could be so afraid, you can be scared to death. And that's the truth. The truth is this, that fear can be so great that you absolutely shut off growth so quickly that you actually die right at that moment. And the reality is, understand the balance of your health is related to the amount of energy expenditure you're putting into protection. So the bottom line, survival is actually equal to growth divided by protection. And now look at this. Turn on the news, read the newspaper, listen to the TV. What do you hear every day? More reasons to protect yourself. Well, the air's not good, the water's not good, the food's not good, these people are unsafe. Every time you turn around, what are you doing? You're walling yourself off more and more. Why? Because growth means to go forwards. What is protection? Go backwards or wall off the outside. We start to isolate when we start to become fear-bound. And as we become fear-bound, we shut down growth as a natural biological mechanism. But it's interesting. I have 50 trillion cells. Each cell can be in growth or protection. But my whole body doesn't have to be in growth and protection, so I can have a range. My body can be in, so many cells are in growth, so many in protection, so I can have a percent. So when I look at the human system, I also recognize that growth and protection is a variable, okay? And here's the interesting part about it. When I'm growing, which biological systems in my body am I using for growth? And the answer is all the organs in here called the viscera. The heart, the lungs, the digestive system, the liver and pancreas, and all these things. These are for growth. When I protect myself, which system do I use? Get out of here, I'll hit you with my lung. No, that's probably not what it is. Okay? The point is, when you're in protection, what physiological systems do you use for protection? Muscles and bones. And the interesting thing is, there's a switch in your body that switches from either the viscera or to the muscles and bones. Remember that thing we call fight or flight? Remember that adrenal system? The adrenal system is a master switch that switches between what? The two systems. The switch says, if I start to get into fight or flight, what am I going to use? Muscles and bones. Well, I shut down my viscera in the process. And that way, I have all my energy allocated to get ready to run. If I need to run away from a lion, I'm not going to start processing digestion at lunch. Why? Well, that energy might be the exact energy that it took me to get the last step so my foot doesn't get caught in a lion's mouth. So the system is intelligent. It says, when you're under threat, it will allocate the energy to where the threats are. It shuts off the visceral system. So the bottom line is simply this. In growth, the visceral system commands the somatic system. It works like this. In growth, I need water. So my body says I need water. Well, how do I get to the water? Oh, well, I move to the water. So how do I do that? Through my skeletal system. Well, who directs it? The viscera says I need water, so the skeletal system responds to the viscera's request. So the viscera administers to the need, the skeletal system administers to the viscera's need. Well, here's the interesting thing. My viscera says, Bruce, you need some water. So I say, okay, let's go get some water. So I start to go get some water, and right away, there's that lion right in front of me. And the fact is this, at the moment I see the lion, well, what do you think I'm going to do? Still go get the water? Nah. Really, at that point, my somatic system says, the hell with the water, we're running. So what's going to happen is I suppress the viscera when I activate the somatic system. And the point is, they're bound to each other. It's called the autonomic nervous system, sympathetic, parasympathetic for the words. But the fact is what? One pushes the blood into the skeletal system, and the other pushes the blood into the visceral system because the blood is nourishing it. So the bottom line is that humans are different than the individual cells because we have this graded effect. And here's the beautiful part about it. And you know this. Love is the maximum nourishment for growth. When you're in love, you will run to that place wherever it is. You have to go over the mountain or through the mountain. You will be attracted to it so much. Why? Because love provides a whole system, all the hormones and connections of the system to do what? Provide for your growth and your maintenance and your health. However, the moment you get in fear, then what do you have to do? You back away, you wall yourself off, you separate from the environment, and the consequence is this. Protection from the environment cuts you off from the environment. Cutting yourself off from the environment cuts you off from life.
When there is a lot of fear, there's a lot of uncertainty. When there's a lot of uncertainty, there is usually a lot of fear attendant to it. And how people react to fear is interesting. Some people just consume more. They say, I'll get it while I can because it's all going to blow up anyway. They become more and more materialistic. Some people they want to be on the right side when the doors close, so they become fundamentalists in one sense or another. They grab on to right as opposed to evil. They want to be one of the 144,000 that gets in the door. And the other group uses it, the uncertainty, as a way to deal with their inner relationship to uncertainty, and they go inward. And you can see the society dealing with the fear that way. And so that real thrust to the kind of righteousness is staying at the plane of good and evil. It's staying at the plane of polarities. And it's not seeing, as G. Manly Hall said, that he who knows not that the Prince of Darkness is but the other face of the King of Light knows not me.
So do you think, because you said in one of the first series you did with Cosmos, that the Queen holds all the spiritual spiritual contracts of the birth certificates of every
and she actually owns the actual birth certificates too.
Because the Vatican gave it to her in 1863. Was it
1813?
1813. You see, you're so brilliant. 1813, and they basically gave it over to the monarchy. So the Queen actually holds all the birth certificate spiritual contracts from all of us.
And the physical birth certificates. That's what allows the Bank of England to fund the asset-backed currencies, or non-asset-backed fiat currencies from the Bank of International Settlement, which is all interwoven with spiritual contracts. Because the Bank of International Settlement, which was based off of future gold earnings and physical earnings, and the actual physical energies of those that were going to be putting into the War Powers Act, all into this one national settlement area, and then the corruption started selling it everywhere, selling the debt to whoever they wanted to, because they could literally create money out of thin air.
So what is happening is that now there comes a phase in which there's a necrotic cycle, a catabolic cycle. And the forces that are predatory in this world that people don't know exist, which is just so wonderful, that people don't know that there is an Illuminati, these forces exist. But these forces exist because they've understood human consciousness. And they know how to work human consciousness. They know how to play on your fears. They know that you're deeply traumatized from a few thousand years back. And therefore they only have to wave a few shadows in front of you and a few big monsters, and you will immediately fall to pieces. And they will quell and destroy any voice that tries to tell you the opposite. But they'll promote anyone who also feeds that trauma, even if those people appear to be on paper against them.
Yeah,
That's not what they're concerned about, whether or not you are helping to engender trauma. Then they leave you alone. Then you're actually serving them. You see how it works?
Yeah, yeah. That's very interesting. I
So
mean,
the way they look at it.
how many aren't, you know, contributing to that?
And how many are contributing to that?
Yeah.
Thinking they're doing good. Well,
Yeah,
many.
of course,
Many,
of
many,
course.
many.
Yeah, of course.
You know, it's not just Van Imp and, you know, these screaming evangelists screaming about the end of the world and the rapture and... And we are being traumatized by the news and by so many other things right now. We're traumatized even by people. You must start to learn that people at work, people around you, as soon as they even mention or bring up in conversation something that's sort of fear-based or paranoia-based, you've got to block that. You don't have to address it, you don't have to say anything out loud, but you've got to go, that's your reality, it's not my reality. You're going to have to defend your sovereignty from those people who go, oh my goodness, you know, I'm so scared, I'm so frightened, things are really crazy. You know, you've got to sort of say, well, I'm sorry for you that that's your reality, but don't infect me with that. I'm in my center, everything is fine. I'm acting the way I need to, I'm being guided, and I am not insecure.
I mean, don't let that in, you mean? Or
Don't let it in.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely do not let it in. Cancel it. Intellectually, cancel it. Because it's an energy that if you know, hypnotists know this.
Sure.
And therefore can infect you.
So any, do you do any grid work to heal
I do
the planet?
quite a bit of grid work on myself. I connect to various parts of the planet, and every day or two I'll do a complete scan of the world, and I'll be looking at the Earth's grid, as well as the code and patterns that are being, think of it like a Morse code. You know, think of a three-dimensional sphere with a grid layer on top of it, and wherever the grid layers intersect, there's a spark of energy and a total random pattern all over the world, and I'll start paying attention to the pattern of the various energy points of the Earth are modified and changed, and I'm looking for how the system of domination and control is being reinvested into the system, because it's ever changing, because a consciousness in Australia might wake up that really requires a lot of energy to put down, or a group of people in India will decide to come together in a dream format that can really change the world, and then they'll come in there and spend energy there. And they have a very low level of reserve energy right now. And
In India?
energy, in total to spend. The system of domination and control has a vault of energy.
Yeah.
And the court system is the daily tax of energy that it gets from the whole world every day. Every culture has a court, and every court in our world is related to an energy domination system, which is fed through England and then into the Vatican and then into Israel to the Temple of Solomon, which is actually a building of spiritual technology that's many hundreds of thousands of years old, that the ruling families and the ruling elite people that have been running the world have always known what this technology is, and
That's
that
right.
for it to be used, you needed a system to communicate to the whole world and tax it of energy.
Wow. So do you think when the monarchy actually engage in the ritual of creating a child, do you think that they do the ceremonies, or that part of, you know, for example, the prince would have done the ceremonies? I mean, do you think that these guys actually consciously prepare for this, or are the families doing that for them in their unknowingness? I mean, how
They
does
are
that
a
look?
part of the rituals in mostly unawareness. They seem docile, these rituals, and then there are others that they were brought to that are not docile. Once they reached a certain age and the impressions and teachings from the parents passed through to what was acceptable for violence or BDSM or any of that other stuff that they were going to be introduced in, people well know what's going on in the British BBC. It's rampant throughout there, and as is that rampant all throughout Europe and the United States. So when you're brought up into that and you have a callousness to it, so when you come upon a ritual and you see something there, oh, it's just for the energy, literally, to keep something in that frequency.
Didn't miss a thing. And so when we see that there are things going on in the world, I've taken the perspective that there are no accidents, especially when it comes to any negative event and anything that creates fear. It is all planned and scripted at every level, from the the highest to the lowest.
It just makes you wonder what has been done in the name of this preposterous lunacy. It makes you weep. It makes me weep. I take this very seriously. And I think very deeply about the crimes that have been done in the name of this palaver and this nonsense, you see. So I'm looking at that. I think if these revelations from Ralph or anybody else can insist in any way to the healing of what has been done, because we carry within our race memory, see, the scars of every human being that's lived on this planet and everything they've had to endure. It's right in you. It's just that we have a circuitry that blocks that. It's called the ego, and we should thank the ego for that ability, because we'd be drowned in sorrow if we had to face what has gone on. And I hope that Leo's talk has, for people who may be new to this, and if you get his book and you'll see what the horrors that have been done in this, never forget that. Because we are the harbingers, we are the descendants of those people who cried in the mines and the factories and the fields. Why? Each individual here carries that weight, because your ancestors died miserable deaths, children in the mines not far away from here, right? On the fields of war, for instance. And in their psyche they asked why, and you are to provide the answer. So even if there's not a humanitarian shred in anybody sitting here, and I hope there is, but just imagine for a moment that you have no real concern about other human beings. Have at least concern then for your own lineage, your own heredity, your own past, and the forefathers, the uncles, and the ancestors, and the grandparents who died hideous deaths for nothing in wars to keep these tyrants in their place. And the answers that you discover in this life, you're answering their call. So never forget that.
And so the densification process, which has taken us down to lower third, has really limited Earth's ability to do what it was.
Correct.
Yeah, its intention, and then Prime Creator is in the process.
Screwing the management up.
Right. Which we
pink slips.
Yes.
Now you've mentioned lack of forgiveness, or a form of energy turned within, and of course we know of fear and anxiety. All these things, I think you're saying that they live in us as our enemy.
Of course.
And in other words, if we have to forgive ourselves and rid ourselves, otherwise we're suffering the consequences, aren't we?
Yes, and of course what happens is that we hurt ourselves constantly by getting ourselves out of harmony. Now, if someone would do the meanest thing to me, my automatic reaction would be one of the deepest compassion for this out of harmony person who is able to do mean things, and I would never hurt myself by a wrong reaction of bitterness or anger. You see, we really have complete control over whether we will be hurt psychologically or spiritually or not, because we can only be hurt by our own wrong actions, and we have control over our actions, or our own wrong reactions, which are tricky, but we have control over them too, or our inaction in some situation that demands action of us. And when we realize this, of course, why, if we have good sense, we just simply stop hurting ourselves and start always thinking things on the positive side and doing things on the positive side and saying things on the positive side.
First of all, your mind is what's interacting with the artificial intelligence belief systems. And when the artificial intelligence is interacting with your mind, it is your own free will that is co-creating with your parasympathetic body to stay within the program architecture of the belief system. So for one to free their mind, they must realize that their mind must settle into their heart. In meditation, when your mind goes into your heart, you're reaching the highest point of perception, because you're not perceiving with the eyes, you're perceiving everything with the heart. And in this meditation process, or in this relaxing process, your crown goes into your heart. You visualize your crown chakra settling into your heart, your third eye into your heart, your throat into your heart, your root into your heart, your solar into your heart, your sacrum into your heart, and everything in the center of the heart. And we say, I return myself to the 0 point of the fetus in mother's womb. And from there, it's what you can perceive from the information of how much your body is resisting from wanting to go into the 0 point of the fetus in mother's womb. That is how much the mind is occupied. And we must learn to unoccupy the mind so we can enter the silence between the doorways of two worlds. And what are the doorways between the worlds? The fact that our brain says, the belief system says, you cannot speak to the infinite ever after life, or you're going to stay in this 3D world and continue on. The other side of that, it is real. and the mind can't fully accept it because there's belief system enhancement tools spread throughout the energy environment of our world that make other people powerful disbelievers.
Yes.
So there might be people that have a person around them that is a massive disbeliever, and as soon as you get away from that person, the paranormal experience will begin to happen and happen more as you allow your brain to settle in your heart, your root into your heart, so on and so forth, and you begin this natural process of sovereignty from the heart. It's sovereignty is built into your DNA. It's a knowingness of freedom.
Yes.
This is what the monks and the nuns teach in the monasteries. You remember the abbot said to us, he said, feeling is the prayer. Do you remember that earlier? Feeling is the prayer. The monks and the nuns, they spend 12 hours, 14 hours, 16 hours in a day in the monastery creating the experiences that give them the feeling, and the feeling is the prayer. We are conditioned to live our lives in our mind and discount our feelings when the truth is that our greatest experience, our greatest power comes from the feelings of our heart. So I wanted you to have just a little experience here this afternoon so that you know the kind of feeling in your heart that creates those effects.
Now, one of the aspects of what's coming and the healing that everybody's going to go through at every level is that you made the statement to me several times that this planet is going to need 1 billion healers to actually heal all of the damage that we've done to ourselves spiritually and bodily.
Absolutely correct. 1 billion healers. And some of them are going to have to be the best soul surgeons in existence because you're going to have to reunite multiple fragments that killed each other. And then reunite the mighty I Am Self with all the separate mighty I Am Selves that should have never been separate.
One of the issues that comes up is if you go back to the geopolitical view of the situation, it's higher members of the cabal that need the most healing.
Absolutely. There has to be forgiveness for some of them because they've been contractually stuck in that scenario. They had no choice.
Yeah, it's been their job to kick the crap out of us, if I may use the term, because from that darkness comes an incredible light in a relatively short period of time because of the sheer contrast it creates. So whilst at one level they're the bad guys, at a higher level they're working for us, which is a concept that, you know, I know that there are people out there who will be listening and saying, well, that's a contradiction, and yes, it is. But examine it closely. If you don't create a situation where there is some degree of conflict, you won't learn. If you're in a corner by yourself and nothing's happening around you, you don't progress. And this is a galactic ascension machine. We're supposed to be here to have experiences, and that's the way it works.
Yep.
And just that concept in itself is a healing concept, because it brings to people's mind that this, I won't call it a game, but it's definitely a process. And it's definitely a planned process because it goes back to the contractual arrangements that we made before we came here. Although the contracts have been, as Andrew's pointed out in the Walking in Energy shows, the contracts have been littered with interference. You might want to speak to that right at this point, Andrew.
Our incarnation grid has been hijacked in such a way when you go to get born in this world, you may make a soul contract, you know, that your third grade teacher is going to be this person, your first wife is going to be this person, your first breakup is going to be that person, your spiritual teacher is going to be this person. These are called soul contracts. And as a free-willed being, you can change soul contracts at any time. Until the grid was hijacked, you had the option to change your soul contracts. You still have those options now, but you have to reclaim all the free will you gave away during all the past lives before to start changing your soul contracts. And when these beings developed this system of hijacking the incarnation grid, they figured out how to insert fine print into your soul contracts that would put you in a situation where you could never really resolve any karma and only create more negative karma.
And the soul contract revocations that you've written are, if you like, the antidote
the antidote to reclaim your sovereign free will, so you have a full understanding that you can literally change all your soul contracts this lifetime right now in this galactic ascension machine, and we can all graduate. The thing is, there's no individual graduation. We all graduate or no one does. And that's where we're at right now. That's why I've come forward as the galactic historian in my sacred neutral perspective, providing as much information as possible without violating the sovereign free will of people that need to figure it out on their own.
Because everyone has, most people have in their contract that they have to figure it out on their own.
In some way, shape, or form, yes.
Indeed. I mean, that's really where the learning process comes in. If you take that out of there, it's more like tourism.
Yep.
And not education.
Exactly. It's tourism and not education if someone reveals you all the secrets.
There's much discussion about the idea of free will. Within a space-time format, the physical nature of the human body is that it contains genetic programming in the form of behavioral and emotional patterns that have been locked into the DNA structure, which is derived from every physical body that's ever contributed DNA to the physical body that's occupied. That means your father, their father,
so you're
mother.
in effect carrying all your ancestors with you.
A lot of reactive patterns and things like that. So you have that plus the cultural programming. You've got a lot of stuff to get rid of and understand. So these emotional patterns place constraints on the activity and the consciousness of the entity using the body, while the consciousness of the entity is indistinguishable from body consciousness. What remains is culturally viewed as free will. The free will can be coerced. Body consciousness is composed mostly of genetic programming. This is what's the genetic entity, as it were, what responds when you do muscle testing. That's the genetic entity, the total consciousness of the body. The environmental and cultural programming make up the balance. So body consciousness itself is almost entirely a chemically based consciousness, okay? And this can be heavily influenced by electronics, and that's part of what the mind control thing is.
Oh, I see.
Okay? It's the basic consciousness of what has been referred to as the genetic entity, the consciousness of the body itself. It's not until the focus on body consciousness is broken that the occupying entity can progress in consciousness and increase perception of surrounding reality structures. You have to break that. On still a higher level of examination, you can look at the genetic programming which exists on a cellular level within the human being and examine some of the areas of interest that relate to this issue. In the human arena, the factors of mass, energy, space, and time play an important part because humans exist as composite entities, if you will, because you have a physical body, which is a biochemical electronic structure made up of mass, which exists in a time track occupying space, which has its own consciousness that's made up of holographic gestalt of cellular consciousness, ultimately based on DNA structures inherited from previous generations. The gestalt consciousness of the body can be called the genetic entity. It appears to have the highest density in the middle of the upper torso of the physical body, which can be seen as a container or vessel for the being which manipulates it. As mentioned before, any event which is experienced by a human being with an emotional component is recorded on quantum levels within the genetic structure on a cellular level. In truth, experience is recorded along with emotional patterns associated with that experience. Mental pictures are also recorded. Many times experience may include periods of physical pain or periods of unconsciousness associated with physical injury or emotional trauma. You could be watching a baseball game and get a headache, not realizing that part of the genetic memory in your genetic pattern includes somebody who inherited part of used part of the DNA in a previous body that got hit in the head with a baseball.
So you're saying that even we tend to attach reasons that would make sense to us to our experience when in fact it may have nothing to do with it.
It may have nothing to do with our specific experience. I mean, there's a lot of things to go through. And these memory traces are very often held at specific points on the time track of the physiological structure in which they occur. So
what do you mean? So when you hit this moment in your life, boom, that's going to happen, regardless of all other input?
Could very well be so, yes.
Okay, so that's why people who are doing past life regression, you hear the story frequently that, well, when I turned 22, then this thing manifested, and I go back and I found that when I was 22 in a past life, this same situation had its point of origin. Like that kind of idea? Okay.
So also memory traces and the accompanying emotional patterns that are inherent in the genetic entity manifested through the reactive mental gestalt can be re-stimulated into manifestation through external influences, which is what you're saying. So the external influence could manifest itself through environmental factors or even on an albeit technical level through implant devices or patterns overlaid within the physical body or within the field surrounding the physical body as higher density implant patterns ingrained in the electronic interference ridges between your auric bands. And this is getting into very technical stuff, but I'm putting it out there anyway. Research indicates the substantial evidence that this is a commonly applied method of manipulation. It's apparently uncommon for the genetic entity to host the same occupying spiritual component twice, and this appears to reflect the overall tendency within the operative manifestation of the universal intelligent matrix for maximization of experiential differentiation. I know I'm using a lot of big words, but I really can't describe it any other way.
Oh, I think we can handle it.
Allowing genetic structures a plethora of controlling host entities. In other words, you as a spiritual occupying entity in a specific body and genetic line you're in have never lived before this lifetime, you see.
You're unique to this moment, but you've
never lived this particular lifetime before.
I see.
So the genetic entity apparently enters the protoplasm line some 2 days to a week prior to conception. Since the genetic entity appears to answer in present time through muscle testing in a dual manner when queried through muscle testing and other methods, it's suspected that the genetic entity is in fact a double entity where one side enters via the protoplasm and the sperm and the other through the protoplasm and the ovum. An interesting aspect of the combination of genetic entity and occupying spiritual entity is that there seems to be some evidence that both components of the composite human being carry facsimiles of the memory of each other, producing multiple facsimiles of past deaths for the same period of linear time.
I said if I had to make such a choice, I would choose being killed rather than killing. In any case where it was necessary for me to choose between harming and being harmed, I would choose being harmed rather than harming. And they said, could you give a logical explanation for such an attitude? Yes, I said, in my frame of reference I could. In my frame of reference, I'm not the body. I'm only wearing the body. I'm that which activates the body. That's the reality. Now, if I am killed, it destroys merely the body, which is transient anyway. But if I kill, it injures the reality, which can only be injured by my own wrong act.
Well, you and me are Irish, so we're habitually pessimistic about tomorrow, but optimistic about the day after tomorrow. So that's the answer. And I think, but to be more serious about it, oh, by God, if consciousness is left at the door, which I tend to think is happening, yes, then, we have to be realists and go, but at the same time, there is a turning of the tide now where consciousness and the understanding of our personal responsibility in all of this, and not finger pointing, it's them, it's, it's over the hill. If we can turn that corner, then the whole game changes. This was pointed out in Professor Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, in which the most insignificant, smallest, lowest level of society has the biggest effect. Can do things that powerful wizards cannot do, right? And if it was good enough for Professor Tolkien to believe in that, it's all right for the rest of us to believe in that. They can't win because, as I've all said in my other metaphysical work, evil contains within it the seeds of its own destruction. And one really needs to meditate on that deeply and also see it applied in your own life with the tossers that surround us and all the evil injustices that are done, even in plain view. Watch that experience. Watch what happens to a person who's evil and ruthless and negative. Just observe it. And you'll notice that this is in fact the case. And it's certainly the case up the fractal. Evil contains within it the seed of its own destruction. The moment that you take that kind of anti-human negative stance, you're just waving a red flag to nature, go come and get me, which is exactly what's happening now. It's called the age of revealing and the age of awakening. All the message that somebody like me can give is, can you please get into the spirit of that? Because it's happening anyway. And you can either get into sync with it, or you can just sit there and be smashed when the river takes a turn. Your ego boat, right, will be smashed. Can you let go of the shores, like the Hopi prophecy says? Can you let go of the oars and go with that flow? Because it's a very dynamic flow, and it will handle it. What happens with us is that we think, oh my God, what's little old me going to do? It's really difficult, and then it becomes like you're suddenly taking it personally, as if your ego is going to be able to run out there like in the old days, grab a sword and do something about it. We have no capacity in that realm. It's a mixture between tremendous responsibility and self-awareness of it, but at the same time the ability to, as Neil was saying, go yin. Let go and let the higher force guide you, because without that guidance, you're pottering around is like a kid with a giant sword, playing games. A higher form of guidance and a higher form of strategy takes care of this. It doesn't mean abnegate your responsibility, but it means try to always remain with your head in the clouds but your feet on the ground. This is both a physical war, but it's also a psychic one. And the guidance that comes to you is the most important thing, and it will show you where to go and what to do about it. And that kind of particular guidance I'm talking about is not the same kind of sorcery that the Black Lodge has. They have high intelligence, and they have tremendous human knowledge about us on the most fundamental levels. But they lack that connection to the higher intelligence. And that's their ultimate downfall, together with what I said about evil having the seeds of destruction within it. You choose that road, and you will be terminal. You choose the organic, living, feminine, flow of the Tao, and no matter what tyrannies exist in the world, no matter how things get bleak, even if things get 10 times as bleak as they are now, worse, like a prison planet, really and truly, as long as you're with that flow, you're in your center, and it doesn't matter, you see. So it's all about where you are, and they can't inhabit that place, which is why they want dominion, right, over the world. If you can't rise yourself, what's the next best thing? Push everybody down. You're actually remaining exactly where you are, but you've done a good job, like the teachers and bastards we have to deal with every day. They're going to, push you down, and then they feel mighty high. Well, that's what the Bushes and Obamas and the Stalins and all do. They cannot rise themselves, and we have to understand this. They're static spiritually. And the moment that you start doing your spiritual homework, the moment that you do your spiritual homework, you are then on the road to victory. That's the basic way I see it.
That's what Vern says. It's just feeding on its own pathology. It's just perpetrating the pathology.
And yes, and deep down inside, people know something's wrong. They have an essence. They suspect certain things, but having no other reference point, they're not willing to make that little leap. They shouldn't be afraid to make that leap. They are the path, They have more in common than they suspect. Consciousness is the name of the game, not politics.
Well, then what's stopping people? A lot of people aren't being stopped, and the paradigm shift is,
Because they have fear. They're basically culturally conditioned, and
well, by the name of your book, you would assume that you believe that we have a little help in maintaining fear. We're having a little encouragement from outside.
Yes. From part of the negative structure, yes.
Perpetrating itself just in its own dynamics?
Yes, I mean, they're trying to cause as many unaligned people to align themselves in that direction, to supply more energy to that resonance, as it were. But that resonance is self-defeating.
Just say a few words about it. I showed a clip the other day about the collectivism. It was a logo, a corporate logo, in which person's sense of identity is entirely based on the social persona. So this is where the Black Lodge wants us to be, where you have, or let's put it this way, any sense of self that you do have is basically a collectivized sense of self. That's the herd. They've already done, you're already doing the work for them then. And they don't need to do anything more except impose, the chains of gold upon you if you're not able to really connect with what it is that makes you unique. We all know what it is that makes us the same as everybody else. Our names, our philosophies, even the work that we do. You say you're a taxi driver, well, 10,000 people can say that. What makes you really real? If you stood up and said, well, I'm the man who cares about being, I'm the man who cares about meaning, how many will say that? As Nietzsche and Heidegger and these people have said. But the rest of us goes, well, I paint the walls, or, I drive a bus. There's an inauthenticity implicit in that collective herd, and it's stepping out of that into your individuality. Knowing who your enemy is on the physical level, and realizing what they're really about. They're not really about imprisoning you. Somebody talked about affluence earlier. That's right, they don't mind giving you all the affluence. That's not the problem. Their problem is control of your mind and the dumbing down of your individuality. That's where the prison lies. It's an internal psychic one. And the only way for you to handle that is to do what you need to do from your inner self, right? That's absolutely know thyself. And a point will come where you will have to then differentiate yourself from every other creature on the face of this earth. Maybe not the animals, because that was spoken of in other lectures about asking the animals for their power, to lend. Let's not even go there. From the human point of view, it may come to the point where you have so transcended them, the mass, the herd, the das Man, that yes, you feel that you stand alone in the world. Now, do you know why so few people take this road? It's because that's very hard and painful to do. Right? The road to selfhood is very difficult.
The question we asked were, if you could take on the karmic responsibility of the Illuminati, would you do it? And if so, are you not doing it?
We're already doing it. Karma is nothing more than ignorance. Dharma is knowledge. Dharma is awareness, right? Ignorance is what they're in. They're in a form of ignorance. Like I said, they've chosen a road, and ultimately, metaphysically speaking, that's a road of ignorance. By sharing the ignorance or being under the force, under their dominion in any sense of the term, right, which is ultimately meaning that you believe everything they're saying and you don't think for yourself, then you are in a state of karma, as worse than theirs or whatever. You can't measure it. Ignorance is ignorance, regardless if it's on the massive scale, right, of Big Brother, or on your individual scale. The time has come now, though, for the human race to wake up and grow up. And there's a sovereignty and individuality involved in that. Let's go with it. Let's enjoy it. Let's be grateful for the fact. Raise a glass of wine in your garden and celebrate the fact that now has come the final time, either because of the affluence, either because of the historical period we're in, because the tyrants have changed their tactics, whatever. All of that is pertinent. But the same fact remains that some other historical action is taking place, in which the world now, through the internet and through whatever, is getting this kind of information. Celebrate that. Be very grateful for that. And at the same time, always, always, always congratulate yourself for coming as far as you do. It'll negate the pessimism that you may have, and it will really give you enthusiasm to carry on in the future.
Where can we go from here? Man does not have rights. He has responsibilities. He doesn't have a right for freedom. You have a responsibility to be free. You have to earn it. It is not going to be like the rapture where God comes down and hands you a free gift. You've got to do the work. And if you don't do the work, you're lost. And that's what all saints in history have said. The importance of meditation and training the mind. The importance of training the body. The importance of training your appetites. You must start to begin to see this on a larger level of perspective, like witnessing, where you can watch your behavior and watch your choices and why you're making those choices. And with these rules, you can start to begin to maybe do something about it.
The significance of 12 years of emotional body training is that is exactly what they were doing in ancient Egypt. There was a 12-year school, a 12-year Egyptian mystery school, if you will, that focused on emotional body clearing. The training was called the left eye of Horus. The left eye because the left eye is controlled by the right brain. It's the side of the mind or the brain that sees life intuitively. This is what was going on in Egypt. And I had had 12 years exactly of emotional body training when the missing information began to, like I say, magically appear to me. So I was recreating unknowingly what was going on in ancient Egypt. There's 12 temples, 12 major temples in Egypt along the Nile. The initiate would spend about a year in each of these temples, learning how to move through fears and limitations associated with each of the 12 major chakras. There's one specific training that the initiate would go through in the left eye of Horus training in the temple known as Kamumbu. the initiate would stand in front. There would be a wall right in front of them, and then there would be 3 steps leading down into water, and it was dark. They couldn't see any further than the 3 steps. So the initiate was told only one thing, that is to go into the water and to find a different way to come out. That's all they were told. It was, again, dark, and it was deep. It was about 25 feet deep. After they carefully went through and came into an opening, they could see that there was a tank now that was lit. When they got into this tank, they also saw that they had company. There were crocodiles in that tank. And remember, the instructions are to find a different way out. Well, looking through the crocodiles, what they could see is that up at the top here, there was a way out. When they came to the top, they were told by the instructor, oh, by the way, you just failed. That was not the way out. So failure meant that they had to go through a lot more training. Then when it was thought, after much more training, that they were ready, they went back into the tank again. Now, this time they knew there were crocodiles. So, you know, in a way, you would think that makes it almost worse. In the moment of their greatest fear, they had to go deeper until they found the correct way out. So, to me, this just perfectly illustrates the whole concept of emotional body clearing. If you can allow yourself to have a thorough experience of something that you would otherwise tend to avoid or to resist, what happens is you move through it. In this specific instant, the fears integrate. So that by the end of 12 years of training, these guys were fearless. I mean, nothing bothered them.
And you may want to share with the persons watching this program as to important goals that you feel are worthwhile for realizing the human potential.
Well, of course, I set priorities in my life from the time that I was a child. I remember my priorities at that time were my homework and my chores, and I would get them done. And I remember also that I always really enjoyed other things. My girlfriends didn't always. They were too often worrying about their homework, which wasn't done. But my homework, my important things, that was all done, and so I enjoyed other things. Now, this taught me self-discipline, and it led to a very orderly life. I still have priorities in my life today. And then the pattern of choosing to be free. Not all people choose this. In fact, we choose for ourselves a variety of enslavements. I remember when I was a child, I was offered real cigarettes from a package, which I didn't smoke, but my friends did. In high school, I was offered every kind of alcohol you can think of, which I didn't drink, but my friends did. Now, I faced a test in this regard just beyond my student days. All my friends at that time used both alcohol and tobacco, and with this push toward conformity in those days, they actually looked down on me because I didn't. And gathered in someone's living room, I said to them, look, life is a series of choices. Nobody can stop you from making your choices, but I have a right to make my choices too. And I have chosen freedom. And then I went right on to choose freedom from other enslaving things like negative thinking, meaningless activities, unnecessary possessions. It stayed right in that pattern all through my life.
Is there really freedom without self-discipline?
There cannot be. You see, you are definitely not free if you do not have self-discipline. Actually, the self-centered nature is never completely free because it is governed by the wishes for comfort and convenience on the part of the body, by the demands of the mind, and by the outbursts of the emotions. It is only the higher nature that can control body, mind, and emotions. And of course, constantly in your early life, you're going through that struggle between body, mind, and emotions and the self-centered nature, which is using them to some extent without ever being fully able to control them.
Mm-hmm. Now, I've often said that if one isn't disciplined from within, and that's the best discipline one can have, then there has to or should be some external control, certainly when they're children. One of the problems in our society, it seems that we don't make the transition from external control to self-discipline. Somewhere along we grow up and we take charge of our own lives, or we should. And of course, again, we have permissiveness and lack of control, either external or internal.
The children, when there is external control, you see, learn best through example. It really doesn't matter what you say, it's what you do that the child follows. So I would wish for all children, of course, that the adults around them are always very good examples.
Right.
In 2012 was about the great information of disinformation, and now in 2013 is not about information at all. It's about truly understanding the more information you bring, the faster you bog down the system. And that creates the great opposition of what's going on now, the tug of war between the forces of light and darkness. But those of us that ultimately understand, those that are in the polarity of light and darkness, are simply at that change, at that rites of passage where they must give that polarity away for just a few moments so they enter the innocence of the inner child and they can tell the world what it is that they want without polarity. And once that is done, the hive mind that is Earth listens to you through its dreamtime societies in the north and that of the south, and takes the grand equation here and begins to balance it. Once that balance is done, Earth itself will give away much of its concept as its knowledge and wisdom becomes much apparent to those that have chosen to come here with contracts of Earth to tell a truth, their truth. Because the reality is there are 7 layers of truth on Earth, and that represents the 7 future generations that are coming. We, the people here, mold this wet clay, and before we stick it into the fires of creation, we make sure that that's what we want to create. And that's what's coming to us, that choice, that wisdom, that knowledge of if we put this piece of clay into that kiln, we are creating something that the 7 future generations must begin to deal with or incarnate with. So what I'm saying here now is our opportunity to hear the stream of energy that is here must understand that the aggressive nature of the messages that are coming ultimately deter you from the giveaway, deter you from seeing the details of how you can endure fear. How do you endure fear? For those of you that truly remember 2012, 2012 was about setting the fear fires all over the world. But all of a sudden we realized the fire of fear that they were doing were wet wood making smoke, and not this great fire of fear. Now we begin to disassociate from our governments, disassociate from our leaders and people that would say this is the only way, because there are many other ways. There are 7,300,000,000 different ways, one for each person upon this world. So now that we understand that we have a common denominator of 7,300,000,000 people, we take it to the next level, that each person shares a dream time, and each person that shares a dream time is part of the whole of Earth Mother and is a part of the equation of balance. When we take that equation of balance, we need to be a transmuting force, not a transmitting force, not a corruptive or destructive force, but transmutation, where you take one substance and you turn it into another with the will of the dream of that of the Earth. Because we are ultimately linked to her heartbeat, her existence, her vibration, through the ability to gather our wisdom and knowledge, to plan our lives, to understand that the patterns we physically weave here in dream time ultimately come out in our present time. In the beginning, I told you the story of friend Antelope. Antelope's message is that of action. Only action turns knowledge into wisdom. So we, the spirits that are sparked full forward here in this state of action, that state of wisdom, where we are converting and transmuting what we do into our personal wisdom that affects our 7 future generations. There's a concept that is not easy for people to understand, that an action now affects your 7 future generations. In the council of wisdom that I was pulled into in the streamer of green light of the northern hemisphere, I was asked that question, how do we convert this for everyone? And it comes to a simple point. People have to take time aside, just like coming to this radio station that turned off the TV. So we're going to be presenting an additional way for those people that want to confront their dream time, to understand their dream time, to know their dream time. I'll be setting time aside to do specific things to help people with that process. I'll be doing stream reads of the dream servers that are coming to us and out of the 7 generations that are dreaming in co-creation with us.
So the world we're facing today is, in a conclusion, cosmic joke, if I would really look at it the way I love to see it, is that we've been programmed to believe that we die and then we go to heaven. My perception is a little different. I think we're born into heaven. And this is where we come to create. This is where we come to have experiences. When we die, we carry those with us, but not the opportunity to make more creations, because this is a virtual reality suit that, as I was saying earlier, when I wasn't spiritual. I had nothing to do with spirituality. I was doing genetics and molecules, all these things. And then I saw the nature of the spirituality, and it was a moment of my whole life changed. And the moment was when I asked myself, when I owned all of a sudden that I have a spiritual part to me and a physical part. And I asked myself, why have both? And the cells answered the question. With a question, I asked, why have both a spirit and a body? And the cells said this to me, Bruce, if you're just a spirit, what does chocolate taste like? And all of a sudden I realized that's a short way of saying all the experiences, the emotions, what you see with your eyes, what you hear with your ears, what you taste with your, what you feel and touch and smell, all of that is derived from this cellular machine that converts the sensations of our world into vibration, and the brain sends the vibration back to source. And I realized, biggest mistake in my whole life, because as males, what was the programming? Males were programmed not to be sensitive. Because if we were sensitive, then we were sissies. So we got to the point of how insensitive we can be. Well, hit me and see if I cry. That's the, that was the test. I'm so insensitive, you can hit me. And then, of course, we grew up in a world with all these women with all their sensitivity, because that's allowed. And they look at us going, how come they're so damn insensitive? And it's the programming. And the fact is, I've wasted a lot of my life realizing that our business on this planet is experiential, and to go and be creative, and to manifest experiences you want to carry with you. And the group of the Synergy Foundation, you people all here, are creating experiences in this world, and you're at a level of your experiential creations are capable of influencing a large number of other people, because that's how it's going to spread. As people let go of the programming and move into personal creativity, we all create heaven on earth when we're in love. If we got rid of the program, by then definition, everyone would be manifesting their version of heaven on earth. And I think this is the destination that we're moving into, but the old structure is in a state of collapse with new thinking. And this is what Greg and I emphasize about the new science, the new thinking that shapes the way we live. So we are definitely on the verge of the greatest possible step of human evolution ever, the coming together of a unity called humanity. And the synergy of 7 billion people coming together in the world of science leads to something called emergence. And emergence is things we couldn't even imagine right at this minute. When that many people come together, will pop out of our world. So there's a world that's so far beyond even our imagination at this moment, just looming on the horizon. And as Greg said, all the answers that we need are here, and when this comes together, it will completely turn this planet into heaven on earth, which it rightfully is.